actually do. All right, that was just leaf shape. Yeah, so that's just one thing that you're looking at that differs among all these 2,200 varieties. Then there's leaf pattern, and we've seen some of this already, but variegation is really hot in orchids in general, and it's one of the things that people look for in Fukidan in particular. Two basic color patterns. One is lengthwise stripes, or Shiba stripes, and the other is tiger stripes, or stripes that go across the leaf. And we'll start out with the most prized, which are the Shiba striped varieties. This is Furen, which is a Shiba stripe variety, and in this particular variety, there are differences in the striping pattern among every single leaf. No two leaves are alike, which I find just beautiful. I mean, to me, this is a work of art, a natural work of art. What's interesting, too, is there's a baby coming off here that's entirely, or almost entirely yellow. There's a little bit of green in here. There are some growers in Japan who would simply pop that sucker right off and throw it in the trash. I can't do that. Yeah. As a biologist, I would tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that particular growth. Now, not every grower is a biologist. The argument from some of these Japanese growers is that a yellow growth does not contribute to the health of the plant because it's not photosynthesizing. The truth is, it does have chlorophyll in there. It just has a lot more yellow pigment than it does green pigment. So from my point of view, it stays on. Plus, I think it's really pretty. So, this is Gojo Coconut, which is a very popular and common Shiba stripe variety. What's the difference between the two, though?
Variegation.
They're both variegated, lengthwise variegation. This is consistently variegated. Every leaf has yellow on the outside, green on the inside. Which is more prized among the Japanese? Variable or consistent variegation?
Variable.
Consistent. It's Japanese. Come on, you gotta have consistency. Consistent, yes, that's right. So all of the top ranked, and we'll talk about rankings later, but all of the top ranked Fukidan all have consistent variegation. Next slide. This is another consistent variegation variety. This is Miyako. And Miyako, very similar to the last one, has yellow on the outside, green on the inside. There's a little bit of extra striping in there. Okay, price tags. If you've got, let's say, a PAF. Let's say you've got a Paphiopedilum that just won an AOS award, and so you know it's going to be really popular, and you want to make more of it. What do?
Register.
Okay, you register it. How do you get more, though?
Oh, you have to actually you cross it.
Okay. Well, if you want more of the same,
You can't Meristem paps.
you can make. Oh, you can't Meristem paps?
Not paps.
You can make kikis.
Okay, you can maybe get kikis, or you can there are a lot of things that you can Meristem, right? You can Meristem them. Or, you know, there are some things, this is a species after all, so what if I just take this guy and self it, right? I should get some that look just like the parent, right? Right? Yeah, no. That's a great idea, but it just doesn't work. The Shiba striping does not go on to the next generation. If you cross this guy with itself, or with anybody else, then you will get green babies. They'll all be green. If you meristem it, because of the nature of this variegation, it's chimeric, meaning that there are groups of yellow cells that make this area, and then there are groups of green cells that make this area. So if you meristem it, you either end up with babies that are green or babies that are yellow. That's not what that is either. So those are not options. So what do? You grow the plant up until it makes new offshoots. And then you've got more babies. That takes a while. So why do you see the price tag on Fukidan that you see? It's because it's a time-consuming process to get new ones. You can't produce 1,000 babies at a time. You produce one baby at a time. Or on a big plant, a few babies at a time. And that's why they're so expensive. Sometimes, though, you really luck out. All right, so how do you get new Nishi de Miyako? You get them from all Nishi de Miyako. So, with 2,200 varieties of the same species, how do you tell one apart from the other? It's by how they look. Okay, it's not through DNA analysis. It's all about how they look. Nishi de Miyako looks like this. Well, Nishi de Miyako, this particular one, had a baby. Here it is. Do you see it, problem?
Different.
That baby is not you. Yeah, this baby is reversed. The yellow is on the inside, the green is on the outside. That, by definition, is not Nishi de Miyako. Actually, it turns out, in this particular case, it's another variety called Manazuru. The good thing is, Manazuru is even more expensive than Nishi de Miyako. Oh. So, you just made yourself some extra money, which is really nice. It turns out that Nishi de Miyako, about 1 in 6 is the number I've heard, about 1 in 6 babies that it puts out is not itself. It's something else. And that something else is always more expensive than Nishi de Miyako, that's cool. All right, that process of producing babies that aren't you is, in Neoland, we call it morphing. It happens in other species in plant world. It is not a common process, but it is not unique to these guys. It's not mutation in the way that we think of most mutation, in that it's not random. It's something called paramutation, which we don't need to talk about, but it is pretty cool, and we do see it in Neophonetia. So that does happen sometimes, and it's pretty cool. But you can't get these striped varieties through seeds. So that's why the price tag. And that brings us to this little beauty right here. The pinnacle of what everybody wants is a bean leaf, because they're just so preciously cute and small, that's got variegation. So a variegated bean leaf, those fetch the highest prices. So we'll start our auction. Who would like to give the first bid? Who wants to start at $1,000? No, 1,000. Can I hear? How about 10,000?
Wow.
$10,000 for that little guy. Now I heard that 2 summers ago, last summer, not 16 but 15, that there was a plant that went for $30,000. Because people are crazy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. People go nuts for variegation. So these little variegated bean leaves, now I saw with my own eyes when I was in Japan in 2014, we were looking for these, not ones that cost this much. Glenn assured me that we would be able to find some, let's say $250 range. Okay, well I know I can sell something like that. Yeah, we were offered one. It was $2,000, and it did not look nearly that good. I think it had 2 leaves on each side and about half that much variegation. We said, thank you, no. All right, so you would think if you've got half a greenhouse full of bean leaves and stripy plants that you can make yourself some stripy bean leaves, but no. What's the only way you're going to get more of that? Well, there are 2 ways. Luck, because it comes from somewhere, right? So mutation can create that, but the only other way to get it is to let it grow up and make a baby of its own. That's going to take time. All right. Just to get Tsuko. Oh, did we skip one by any chance? Possibly?
No.
Oh, okay. That's all right. That's all right. The other kind of striping is tiger striping. And tiger striping goes across the leaf. Can you see this white back there? Yeah. Yeah, so this is an example of a tiger stripe. And what I've found also is that many of the tiger stripes have these beautiful ruby roots. We'll talk more about roots in a minute, but next slide. There are many different kinds of tigers. Some have more tiger coloration than others. Tiger coloration freaks people out sometimes if you're new to the game because it looks like chlorosis. It looks like a virus. It looks like something's wrong. But the more you see it, and then when you see, okay, the plant seems to be pretty happy, it's kind of a slow acceptance sort of thing. I felt the same way when I first saw them, like, you can keep those. That's not really my cup of tea. But now I really like them. And another interesting thing about tiger coloration is that it can get passed on to the next generation. So you can see that in some seedlings. This is an example of a tiger that's almost entirely gold. This is one that I told you most neos like to have moderate to low light. These gold-colored neos like high light. That actually brings out the goldness. Sometimes when I get these, they're almost green. And the grower always assures me, you put in light, put in light, put in light. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, and they just brightened right up. It makes a huge difference. So in low light, the gold-colored ones will become green. Now, here are a couple of not tigers, but other colors. These show a lot of that purple coloration. Now, some people love this, some people hate this. I love the purple color. One of my girlfriends who's a collector, she hates it. To me, she's like, that sunburn, I don't like it at all. I love it. And then this is an absolutely gorgeous variety. I have a terrible time trying to get a hold of it now. But this is Taiga. And it's a tiger. It's got this yellowy white tiger coloration and purple and ruby root tips. I mean, whoa. That's one when you walk by it, your eye is just drawn to it every time, and I can't get any more. So, all right, so roots. I'm a huge root fan, and that's one of the things I noticed about these guys right away. They're small, which is cool. They've got beautiful leaves, which is great, and then they've got roots going all over the place, which I just love. But not only do you have great roots, but you get these beautiful root tip colors. And I'll show you some more pictures in a minute. But while we're talking about roots, let's really talk about roots. Because roots, happy roots, are the key to a happy orchid. And if you heard my talk already, then you know the punchline of this. But when I was first writing this talk, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to say anything wrong. And so you know how when you water your orchids and the roots turn from white to green? Yeah, because that white part, the velamin, goes from being opaque to being clear, and you can see underneath. And the green is from chlorophyll, which is part of the chloroplast, which allows the plant to do photosynthesis. So I just wanted to make sure that yes, in fact, these roots do photosynthesize, which they do. But in looking that up, I found out something really interesting and important, which is the kind of photosynthesis that they do. So how many of you know that there's more than one kind of photosynthesis? Hey, all right, cool. So you know something that you didn't know before. There's more than one kind of photosynthesis. In fact, there are 3 kinds. There's the kind that most of the plants that you know do, like almost everything that you see outside does. That's called C3 photosynthesis. And that works great unless you are in a really hot, dry environment. So for those plants that are hotter and drier, they do something called C4 photosynthesis. That allows them to hold on to a little bit more of their water and not lose so much. Okay, so things like corn is C4, and a lot of grains, a lot of grassy stuff is C4. And you think about like grasslands and where you don't get a whole lot of water, C4 works great. But then there are plants that grow in areas that are really hot or really dry. So what kind of plants do you think of like that? Really hot, really dry. Like cacti and succulents, yeah. Those guys do a third kind of photosynthesis, which is called CAM, capital C, capital A, capital M, CAM photosynthesis. Guess what kind of photosynthesis these guys are doing?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Even though the leaves are green?
That's right. CAM photosynthesis. Okay.
All of them?
Not all of them, but many of them that have these big fat roots, they are doing CAM photosynthesis. Well, just like cacti, what's the best way to kill a cactus? Overwater it. What's the best way to kill an orchid?
Overwater.
They're a lot more alike than you would have ever guessed. So when you hear someone say don't overwater it, it's not don't baby it. It's because these guys are adapted to low water availability. They want that. They want to dry out. They hate to be wet. It's that CAM photosynthesis. That's what they're adapted for. So that's really important. When you look at the roots will tell you a lot. So as Keith said, does that mean everybody? No. Things with thin roots, they are not going to be doing that, okay? But these big fat-rooted guys, that's a tip-off right there. Just be thinking you want to dry out more, okay? All right. Let's go back to aesthetics, though. Root tip colors. So this guy is considered a mud root tip, which is kind of a brick-reddy sort of color, kind of brown, kind of red. And then we've got green root tips, very lovely. But the prize winner are the ruby root tips. And there are some that have these just stunningly bright pink root tips that I know people who just collect ruby root tipped varieties because they're so beautiful. Now, we've also been talking, we were talking earlier about, well, I did have beautiful root tips and now I don't see any colors on my root tips. What's going on? It just happens that when they start slowing down with their growth, the root tips go away. It's not that they've fallen off, it's not that they've died, it's just when the roots are actively elongating, that's when you see the colored root tips. If they're not really actively growing, you won't see them. So it's just that they're going into a quieter growth period, and it's that time of year. So don't feel bad, you'll see them again in the spring. All right. Now, the Japanese, they're into subtlety, okay? Enjoy your plants 365 days a year. And they're not talking about from here, okay? They're not talking about from here to the table. They're talking about like up close and personal. And that's the only way you're going to see the scale. Technically, that word in Japanese means moon. And the reason they call it the moon is because most skei are crescent-shaped, like a moon. The skei is this point here where the leaf meets the center axis of the plant. This right here. You're not going to see that from across the room. You're just not. You're only going to see that if you're up close and personal with the plant. So it's nice on a plant like this where you have a dark axis and really accentuates that shape. There are other shapes though. So do you remember Kaio Maru? He's that peacock leaf guy, also kind of a beanie looking guy. And he's got a mountain skei. Again, shown off very nicely by this dark axis here. We also have Onami Sekai, which has this wave skei. Looks like a little tidal wave. This also has a leaf shape that I didn't talk about earlier, but it's called a samurai leaf, where it's extremely recurved, and it's got beautiful green root tips as well. All right, well, they are orchids after all, and most people do get orchids for the flowers. So we'll talk about flowers. Most of the time these guys bloom white. This is a typical flower here. Open-faced with a long nectary spur, and they smell great. Like many of the white-flowered orchids, they smell the most at night and then into morning. In mid-afternoon, you may not smell anything, or might smell a little bit of something, but evening and to morning is the best time. And as I mentioned earlier, they tend to be summer bloomers, which really stinks if you have to put in displays the rest of the year, which I do. But in Japan, they do Fukiran judging in May, which is before they bloom. It's not about the flower. So most of them, as I said, are white, but there are pink, green, and yellow varieties. Here are some examples of pinks. In the upper left corner, that's Beni Suzumi. Over here is Shutano, which is probably the most common of all the pinks that you'll see. And then there's a very special pink, Raiko Maru, which is almost solidly pink. The difference among them is Beni Suzumi, $20 a growth. Shutano, $15 a growth. Raiko Maru, $150 a growth. Because the only way to get it is through a division. If you get seedlings of Raiko Maru, they tend to look just like Shutano. So, you get pink, but not that pink. Then we have our green guys. The two most common are Tosamidori and Hisui. It's just a beautiful flower. It's kind of subtle, as many green orchids are. They smell great, as do all these different colored orchids smell as good as the original whites, which is really nice. Then we have yellow. Ogan Maru and Kibana Furan are two common ones. It is generally accepted in Fukiran world that the yellows did not come naturally. It's not a natural mutation, unlike the pink and the green. But that these were crossed with probably an ascocentrum at some point, and then back cross until they look just like a Neophonetia, and the color remained, but it's not a full-bred Neo. So that's generally accepted. All right, you saw the typical flower shape. There are also some different flower shapes. This is Hoshigaruma, which is a spurless variety. So you get the petals more of almost like a daisy shape, but there's no spur. This is just the peduncle, like the holding the flower up. And then a lot of bean leaves show this interesting star shape, where it's an upturned flower with a short nectary spur. And when I saw pictures of this initially, I thought, I think I like the standard flowers better. But then when I saw it live and in person, they're really beautiful. They look like little bouquets of flowers coming off of the plant. So I actually adore this plant. Tamakongo is probably the most people's first Neo ever, is what I have found. All right. Here is another oddity. Oh shoot, I meant to bring this guy. I actually have one blooming right now in the greenhouse. Manjashagi is a 3-spurred variety. It's absolutely stunning. It just looks like a starburst. They're absolutely beautiful.